Hello, everybody, and happy Tuesday to you. And hopefully, you guys are out there enjoying the weather and making memories with good friends, smiling, baby barbecuing, working on your tan, going swimming, doing all those beautiful things on this nice summer day, no matter where you are. And I want to say thank you for joining me for another episode of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. I am Tony Lynch. I am the host, and as always, if this is your first time tuning in, do me a favor, head over to that YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you be notified every time that we drop a new episode. And if you know anyone who can benefit from the conversations that we have, please share this with them. Help us get it out there, reach more people, and help us serve more people, bring more resources to everyone. Now, I have an amazing guest for you guys today, but before I bring her up here, I would like to say that this is for educational purposes only. Now, without further ado, help me welcome my next guest, Jennifer Walsh. Hi.
Hi there, Tony.
How you doing today?
I'm doing well, and yourself?
I am doing awesome. Thank you for joining me on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. Now, before we get started, tell people who you are, where you're from, and about the work that you do.
Okay, my name is Jennifer Walsh. I'm from Chicago, Illinois, originally born and bred. And I recently published a book called Necessary Grief, and it's all about the journey I've taken over the last couple years through trauma work and the focus on specific childhood trauma and that type of thing, and the ending of my 27-year relationship. And kind of all the work I did through that is kind of put into the book. And I am also a trauma-informed somatic coach.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you for the work that you do. I'm anxious to hear your journey about how this all came about. How did Jennifer become the amazing person that she is now?
I think that at some point in your life, like when lots of things happen to you, right? I think we all get somewhere because things happen to us.
Mhm.
And over the years, even since my childhood, I had a lot of, like I'd say bodily symptoms, a lot of things because of a difficult childhood, and then went through difficult teenage years, and then suffered a lot of loss. And then I actually myself have 4 children, and 2 of those kids have special needs. And so just the journey through all of the hardships that we've, endured ourselves, kind of led to a place where at a certain point, I wasn't able to kind of hide from all the stuff that had happened.
Mm-hmm.
I think I spent a lot of time ignoring a lot of the stuff that happened and trying to mitigate circumstances. And, even through some really tough times when my kids were growing up, we became a safe family, host family for children in crisis. So at any given time with my 4, I might have 3 extra kids in the house. And we were taking kids back and forth from shelters and visiting with parents and doing all kinds of that stuff. And, it was an effort on my part to give back. And it profoundly affected my kids to this day. It's been one of the best things I think we ever did. But it was also a way for me to kind of hide from the reality of my circumstances, right? And so, I think the trauma work I ended up doing in the past, like say 3-ish years, really kind of confronted me with all the material. And that's what led me to become a coach and all of that good stuff.
Okay. I have a question. I know you touched on it a little bit about childhood traumas and things like that. What can you run us through some of the situations that you encountered as a kid and growing up into your teenage years, right? Because like you mentioned before, it's easy for us to hide from a lot of those things.
Yeah.
In
And
these,
sometimes I think it's necessary as kids, right? You
Mhm,
don't really
mhm,
have a choice. And actually, okay, so as you're asking, it was one of those things that I was going through the professional training of compassionate inquiry, which is Dr. Gabor Mate's program.
mhm,
And it was one of those things that got said about childhood trauma is about not only what happened to you, but what didn't happen. And
mhm,
so I sort of fall more into the camp in some respects of what didn't happen. I was a kid. I was an only child-ish. My parents, it was my dad's second marriage. My dad did have three other kids from a previous marriage, but they never lived with me. And
Mhm.
if you'd ask my dad how many children he had, he would say one. And
Okay.
it was a yeah, it was a difficult dynamic, and my grandfather was, an alcoholic. We kinda lived in the same building as they did. They owned a building, we lived in an apartment above. The dynamic between my parents and my grandparents wasn't good. My dad was kind of a Jekyll and Hyde personality, and, um, he could be violent occasionally with my mother. So there was all kinds of chaos growing up and a lot of unsurety, a lot of my mother was ill often and sometimes would disappear for periods of time and I had no idea where she was and no one told me where she went. And all that kind of stuff. And then as I got into my teens, my dad and I didn't have a great relationship. And over the course of the time I was maybe 16, 17 till about 25, my dad would repeatedly say, I don't ever want to see you again. And, like, there was no, like, real precipitating factor to that, so it was always just a really difficult dynamic to deal with, like, you just kinda never knew what was going on.
Mhm.
So my experience of childhood, um, yeah, it was a lot of instability, unsurety, just, like, never knowing where you were at and not feeling or really being supported emotionally or mentally in a lot of ways.
Wow. Okay. Um, so I get it now because a lot of times, people don't understand that you can, you can go through the things that never, that you didn't have.
Right.
It makes a lot of sense in that aspect. How did it affect your friendships? Having to deal with that, did you find it easier to kind of navigate with the mask on, and and kind of like give people the idea that you were okay?
Yeah, I think a lot of people didn't really understand. I think even to this day, some of my childhood friends would be like, "What?" "What are you talking about?" Because it wasn't something we ever talked about, and my family was pretty big on secrecy and not, like, having any of the business outside of the family and that type of thing, and I think sometimes when things happen, you create beliefs about yourself, right? Like
Yeah.
I know for myself, there's a specific instance when I was 4 that I saw my dad kind of like hold up my mother to the wall by her neck, and I had come in, and I think he didn't realize I was there. And when he saw me, he kind of like let her down, and he like strode out of the house. And I called him back at 4. I remember calling him back and saying, "You come back and apologize," and he did. And for me, that created a belief that
Mhm.
I was powerful, that I could control situations. And for me, the thought of like danger doesn't ever come up, anger comes first. So
Mm.
it did profoundly affect a lot of my friendships and stuff because I was navigating from a place of, a lot of confusion. So I kind of never knew how to be. And I think
Mhm.
it was just one of those things that I just tried to fit in anywhere I could, any way I could.
Okay, okay, but that makes sense, right? Because that it just reminds me of there's a lot of children out there that do the same thing. And it's a defense mechanism, right?
It is.
Keep myself safe. And I remember when my son was younger, I used to always tell him, when you go to school, keep yourself safe,
Yeah.
right? You know what I'm saying? And I didn't realize, because I did everything I could to make sure they had a really good childhood, right?
Sure.
Um, yeah, and have that bond with me to be able to talk to me about anything that was going on. And I wish that for any child that's out there. But the reality of it is that there are children out there that are going through some of the most craziest things, and they don't have anyone to turn to.
Right.
And so, just like myself, um, I had to learn how to keep myself safe,
Hmm.
right? And you said something very important. That second language, that anger comes out And some people are so good that when the anger does come out, you never know that they're angry until it's already too late.
Absolutely.
You're like,
Absolutely.
oh, hold on, who unleashed this little beast?
Yeah, right. What happened here?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And I think that one of those pieces, so just as you were talking about your son, I was thinking about this because one of the things I think doesn't get touched on enough is that authenticity versus attachment piece. Like
Mhm.
there's this thing about kids have a choice between authenticity or attachment, but actually that's a lie. They don't. They have to be attached to their caregivers because it's survival, right? They have to be. So that authenticity gets pushed down all the time. And when you grow up as a child of many different kinds of circumstances, if you don't have the choice and you're always in survival mode, you don't learn the tools to be able to function as an adult in awareness. It just doesn't happen.
Mm, I agree. I definitely agree because there's once you, as a child, it makes sense to survive in the world, right? Because
Yes.
we're taught, and you know, we're taught those things subconsciously, right? By watching, you know what I'm saying? Watching how people respond or react to certain things. And we go, oh, that's the way that I'm supposed to maneuver around the world. And then we often hear those terms, you're gonna have to grow up sometime.
Mhm.
You ever heard that term? You're gonna have to grow up
Absolutely.
sometime.
Yeah.
As a young boy, you're gonna have to man up. Don't cry, you know. And the one that I used to love the most. Boy, you better get your butt on back out there and fight him.
Right. Right. Yeah.
You either go out there and fight him or you come in here, I'm gonna beat you up. I was like, shoot, I'm gonna go out there. And then you get told when you go out there, if you get your butt whipped, we're gonna be fighting him again tomorrow. What?
Right.
Hold on, if I get my butt, what makes you think I want to go and fight him again tomorrow?
Oh, right. Right. Exactly. Yeah. And it's a no-win situation for a kid
Right,
in that
right.
way, right? I mean,
Yes.
yeah. Yeah. And then you're saying like what you're saying about the grown-ups act like a grown-up. Well, if all the grown-ups act a certain way in my world and that's what I'm learning from, maybe I'm not learning the healthiest way.
Yes. Yeah. And you that just goes back now as adults. We can look back on the past and look at what our parents did. And I often wonder, not in a bad way, but who taught them,
Exactly.
right? Who influenced their actions to where their actions spilled over into me,
Exactly.
or like other parents and things like that. Because when we think about it now, right? Um, if we look at the overdose rate of children nowadays,
Mhm.
suicide rate of children nowadays,
Mhm.
is such a huge dynamic these days, right?
It is.
And I know being a Gen Xer, you know, we 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 messed up a little bit, right? But we
Mhm.
try to protect our children from the things that we went to. I remember talking to friends that were having kids and things like that. And they were like, "I'm gonna make sure that my kids have the best life possible." And I see their kids now, and I see the parents, and I go, "You forgot something." Right? They go, "What?" I said, "You forgot to teach your kid to live in a world without you."
Mm.
And they go, "Well," I was like, "No, no, think about it. We're getting up in age.
Mhm.
We're not going to be around forever.
Mhm.
You sheltered your kid your whole entire life."
Mhm.
It's, I can understand not wanting to pass on generational trauma.
That's the thing, exactly. But
Right,
sometimes we go too far the polar opposite.
right, right, right. And so I was like, we have to figure, and I told him, I said, "You forgot to figure out that happy medium. You
Mhm.
still have to get them out into the world and prepare them for everything that life is going to throw at them.
Right.
Because right now you've been protecting them, and the only thing they know is the video games.
Right.
And that's not real life. So what happens when you're gone? Who's going to take care of your child then? Right. And I also see the other side as well.
Yep.
Children who were like us, grew up with the trauma, with the butt weapons. You know what I'm saying? We were told to go play in traffic, right?
Mhm. Right.
Don't come back in the house until the street lights come on.
Yes, yes.
and all of those different things, right? And I think that's where a lot of the secrets lie,
Mhm.
right? Because we were the kids that had to go outside and things like that. Or when mom and dad went to work or something like that, they would take us to the neighbor's house.
Mhm.
You know, and sometimes you ran across some of the neighbors that wasn't good for children,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I relate that to what we see now in
Mhm.
the world. I want to get
Yeah.
to some.
So, I can see both sides, same as you, right? And that's the thing though, but I do feel like, it goes back to sort of that hunter gatherer type of thing. I'm sad
Mm,
that we moved away from that, where it is more
mm,
of a community raising kids, because we put parents in an impossible situation. It's impossible to be everything to your kids and to do everything completely properly, especially if you have no real roadmap because maybe you weren't parented a certain way or whatever. But I think trustworthy other adults in the sphere that help things along is such a crucial piece that's missing. But
right,
you're right. I mean, if the other people around aren't safe, then you're sort of like, well, what am I doing here, right? But
right,
but so I feel like this is the advent of advocacy, right? I feel like advocacy has risen to a point where it's so necessary now because we have all these parents trying to fight battles they have no idea how to win,
right, right.
you know?
That's why the importance of the work that you do is understanding that and then giving them the tools to be able to fight back a little bit, right?
Hmm.
And it goes back to a term that we heard probably our whole entire lives: keep our children safe.
Hmm.
We have to protect. We have to keep our children safe, right?
Right.
Especially nowadays.
Right.
Especially nowadays. A long time ago, my mom used to always tell me, boy, if somebody, I used to always tell her, Mama, what if somebody takes me? She always look at me like, boy, don't nobody want you. They take you, they bring you right on back, right? Now we can't say that.
No,
Now they
no.
take you, they don't bring you back.
Yeah.
And this is, I really, it makes my heart sad to see the world um, go in the direction that it has gone in, because it's such a common thing nowadays. And then, I don't know, I want to get your thoughts on this, but I have seen children that have been found years later, and you see the damage that has been done to them.
Hmm.
You hear the stories, you hear the nightmares, you hear the crying, and then you see the physical, results, the timidness, the anger, you know what I'm saying, the quick to defend myself, not to let anyone get close to me. And I'm really, do you think we have solutions nowadays that we can fight back on this, or or is it going to take a little bit longer?
Well, here's the thing, and this is just my lens that I look through now, right? But I feel like if much of the world was much more trauma informed, we'd be in a lot better situation. Because
Right.
the fact of the matter is, right, a lot of people don't understand nervous system states and don't
Mm,
understand a lot about how that works. But, like you encounter someone's nervous system far before you ever even say anything to them, right?
right.
And we're constantly regulating, or we're dysregulated, or we're co-regulating. And I think what people don't understand is that that process, even though it's like automatic and subconscious, it makes a big difference. And if you're constantly on guard because you have to be, you're not regulating with anybody,
Right.
right? And
Right.
so, in order to inform the general public about how that works and like how our lived experience informs us and our coping mechanisms, defense mechanisms, and how attachment and all that stuff works, if people knew more about that, maybe they would approach the world differently. Maybe they'd approach children and behaviors differently because behavior is a language, right?
Right. Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
the kids acting out obviously are having a difficult time. They're not necessarily trying to give you a hard time, they're having a difficult time. But a lot of times it's still that dynamic of, I still see the kids should be seen and not heard kind of thing go on all the time, right? And you're like,
Mhm.
there has to be some understanding around what is a kid's experience.
Mm.
And safety isn't just physical safety, right? It's emotional safety and all of those kinds of things. And if kids don't feel emotionally safe, they're not going to be at their best. If they have no safe place to express themselves or go, how is life going to look for them?
Mm. There's a comment up here, LC. I want to put this up here and get your thoughts on this as well, because he did bring up a really good point. The government has taken parenting away from most parents, so it's almost impossible to prevent kids from being taken. That's a powerful one right there. Uh,
Hmm. I guess I would need more context around the comment. I'm not sure what that means. The government has taken away what.
okay, I can elaborate on that as well. LC, elaborate on that and put your thoughts over here and there, and I'll pop that up there. I think coming from a place of being raised in the projects, right? Very, very poor.
Mhm.
Um, and back then, it was it was common for CPS to take kids out of homes,
Mhm.
right? Very, very common.
Mhm.
But then they started passing laws that you couldn't do this. You couldn't do this with your child. You couldn't do that with your child, right? So the term discipline, and I get it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, discipline and child abuse is a very thin line that
Mhm.
goes along with that, and some people don't understand that. They can both look the same depending on the intensity of what you're going through, right? And so the government passed law said, no, you're not, if you hit your child, it's child abuse. If they put up so many regulations around how we parent
Mhm.
children that it made it impossible um, to build any sort of structure with them. Like,
Okay.
survival
Yeah.
is like out
Yeah.
in the flood, I guess.
Yeah. And I think where I would come from with that thought process is let me just ask you this, Tony, like how would you respond to this? Is a person who is hitting a small child regulated in their nervous system?
No.
Right.
Okay.
So that's kind of my whole issue around this thing is
Mhm.
we all have to get better as people about regulating our own nervous systems, right? If we're triggered, if we're
Mm.
whatever, we're not going to be acting out of our best and wisest self.
Right.
Right. And so I think my whole thing that is less a government issue and more like a personal issue, right? Like we all have to be as much as we can in our most self-aware and wisest self in order to make this process better for any kids that come along. And
Okay.
that's where I think I was saying, like, when kids are having a hard time, again, a lot of parents take that stuff personally. Like, well, my kid's acting out or my kid's doing this or that. Okay, but why? Why are
Yes,
they doing that?
yes, they're not asking the questions, the
Right,
right questions,
right.
right? And they're not putting themselves in the situation to be checked, so to speak,
Correct.
right?
Because it could
Uh,
be you, right?
yes,
Like you could be
yes,
the one that's causing the issue, right? But a lot of parents don't want to look at themselves. And again, I think we've all been there. I'm not like throwing out accusations at other people.
no, no,
I've been
no,
there.
you're
We've
absolutely
all been
right,
there,
though.
you know. We get
No, yeah,
triggered by something. We don't say the right thing or do the right thing or we all make mistakes, right? But
very true,
but the fact of the matter is we have to look at ourselves and go, why did that go that way?"
right? But a lot of times, it's what what may be normal to that individual may look like something else to someone else, right? And so
100%.
I think that's where the communication, the education comes in.
Mhm.
Because for one, if you have been abused your whole entire life and that's all you know,
Mhm.
of course that's the way you're going to show up in the world, right?
Of course.
No one ever told you that it was wrong.
Right.
And no one ever like when we can step outside of ourselves and actually look at life, and then we can view life from a 360 once we dig inside of the inside of
Yes.
that circle that we live in of self,
Yes.
and we become more aware. We begin to listen to our instincts. We begin to listen to our heart. we begin to develop certain cognitive behavioral thinking, right? Of going, okay, I know that this over here, right? I don't want to keep, that's where it all starts. I don't want to keep doing this,
Yes.
right? So then once you start to do that, you begin to pick apart the things of why you do it, right? Are these my habits?
Hmm.
Is this a learned behavior,
Correct.
right?
It that's the key, I think, and that's a
Yeah,
self-awareness. It has to come to self-awareness, but it's hard to get there. And I won't say that it isn't. It's really difficult, right?
yeah, oh yeah,
But and like to your point, right? It's like what happens when abuse looks like love, right?
yes,
That's your
yes,
experience of it, right? And
right,
so it's not that you're trying to yet again abuse someone else, but you've never had a healthy look at what love is supposed to look like,
mm, that's very true.
right? And love
I
is
think
not pain, right? Yeah.
yeah, making elaborator on this a little bit. I'm gonna throw this up here. Then I have another question for you as well. So just a little bit more context about what he was saying, being raised by the school, social media, so kids don't have respect. And that again, culturally, things like that, because when we do drop our kids off at school, if we think about what happens there, right? Social media, I know I'm just putting some thoughts out there. Social media do give these kids a false sense of reality.
Sure.
They see the kids out there with the, as they call it, the nowadays, what I'm saying, with the bag, right? They see them out there with the stack of money on their ears, and they driving the fancy cars, right? They living in the multi-million dollar houses, et cetera, right? But
Yes.
here's the one thing that I've never seen was I never see the parents.
Right.
And so, but this is what the kids are seeing.
Right.
So when we get out there, right, and we see little Johnny, what I'm saying, and little Chrissy out there on Instagram and TikTok and watching all of these things, and they going, oh man, automatically they think that they got to go out there and get the bag, right? They're not showing the work that needs to be put in,
Uh,
and it
uh,
almost seems a false sense of reality that
mhm.
I can get whatever I want. People are going to give it to me. So I don't think it's a matter of disrespect or lack of respect. I think it's more of they're being taught that, hey, I don't have to work, and you should just I should be able to get all of this because Big Johnny over here has it,
Right.
right? But no one sees the trauma that's being passed down through all of those different things. No one sees behind the scenes of all the pain and that's being caused. Because if we think about it, right, most of these kids that we see on social media are the ones that are taking their lives nowadays.
100%. And okay, so look, I come from a different thought process around this, not different from you, but just like a maybe more of an outlier prospect.
Right, right,
My
yeah.
kids were largely homeschooled, okay, for much of their lives. A couple of my kids didn't even go to school till high school,
Hmm.
and then went through high school. Their experience of their peers is very different.
Right,
My
right.
kids got to social media very late, because I was all about more of the like natural childhood, more about the play, not on computers, not on this, not on that.
Hmm.
And I think I really heavily invested myself in providing them with the best lens I could provide for
Right.
them to look at the world in a specific way, right?
Hmm.
And my kids are, um, they have very different perspectives from a lot of people their age. Like I said, even doing the safe family thing, right? My daughter works at a school for autism. Her brother's autistic, and she works at a school for autism. And like she
Hmm.
spends a lot of her day regulating kids, and she loves it. But like those things don't happen by accident, right? Like,
Right.
we kind of field and coordinate things in a way to give our kids a certain kind of experience. And I do think, yeah, if you're kind of letting your kid do whatever and being raised by their peers, I mean, I don't know what to say about that, but you know what I mean? And again, I don't want to, here's one thing I don't want to do. There are lots of households that are two-parent households or single-parent households where the parents are primarily working. We've all experienced that, right? We're not
Yeah.
demonizing anybody, right?
No.
Because those are tough situations
Yeah.
and they don't have a lot of choice. And so I was privileged to be able to homeschool my kids. And I will say
Right.
that from the get-go. But like, yeah, it's very difficult for parents who can't be around all the time with the advent of social media and stuff to prevent a lot of the stuff that ends up happening,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But I wouldn't ever say that I could go down the route of like the discipline as like spanking or hitting your kids is the way to go regardless of the situation. I'm like,
Right.
you know, you're in a dysregulated state if that's the way you're approaching it, in my view. And there's lots of ways to parent or consequence your kids without it being physical.
Very true. Very true. One of the things I used to do when my son used to get in trouble, I used to always tell him, if your arms are tired, you can't hit anybody.
Yeah, I got some chores for you to do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I was like, you know what? Because he used to love chores, so I knew that wasn't a way to get him. I said, you're going to stand in the corner, and I want you to hold your arms out just like this. Don't touch the walls, but I want you to keep them shoulder length, right? And he would sit there, and you know, I would. He learned pretty quick. You know, he did learn pretty quick not to put his hands on people.
Mm-hmm.
He was like,
Yeah,
I'm not doing that.
I don't want to do that.
I was like, I know, right? So if your arms are tired, you can't hit nobody.
Yeah.
And then you're going to sit down, and then we're going to talk about why all of this happens. I want you to understand the consequences of your actions.
Mm-hmm.
Also to understand one big thing I always embedded in him was that, look, in life, you will have consequences for everything that you do.
Mm-hmm.
Whether if they're good or bad, but you get to choose whether or not if you want the good consequences or the bad consequences.
Yep.
So, you know, and then I told him, I said, think about it this way. Would you like it if someone hurt you?
Mm-hmm.
He goes, no. I said, then why would you do it to someone else?
Right.
Because just like I would get upset if someone hurt you, their parents are going to get upset because someone hurt their children.
Right.
So instead of being that, be the one that protects those that cannot protect themselves.
Right.
Right. Now, my next question is, because I know I want to talk about your marriage. You said that you divorced after 27 years.
Yeah, my husband last year asked me for a divorce after 27 years, and it was kind of a surprise. And it's one of those things where, like, you know, the catalyst for it kind of is that I asked him to work on his childhood trauma. And he had spent a year kind of going to some therapy and things like that. And at the end of the day, it came up that I had opened Pandora's box, a box that he'd rather had stayed closed. And now he can't close it. And so it was one of those things that as hard as this is, and it's really impossibly hard, I've known him since I was 15 years old.
Yeah.
And I still love him with all my heart, really. But the fact of the matter is, I couldn't watch him slowly kill himself anymore. Like, he's a workaholic from the get-go, 80 to 90 hours a week. You know, he was experiencing symptoms like a feeling of like a strap across his chest all the time. He was having all kinds of other symptomology. And I was like, this can't go on. Like, I can't watch you do this to yourself. And again, you know, he's been largely absent in a lot of ways because he spends so much time working and doing other things, running from feeling the things that are there that he won't access.
Right.
And that's played a part in difficulty for my kids as well, because they don't have the experience of you know, someone who was kind of really invested in their day-to-day stuff. And you know, so yeah, it was one of those things I kind of knew at the beginning when I asked him that could be a natural consequence. And I certainly didn't want it. But I was like, I can't do this anymore.
I understand. Megan just put a comment up there. I'll pop it up here soon. and I'm only speaking from a man's point of view when I say this. So I'm not speaking for everybody. I'm just relating from what you said. So I don't want people to think that I'm diminishing anything from any aspect of it. All anything that you experience, right, is yours.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that it's any greater or any lesser than anybody else's. So I don't want people to ever think that, that I would ever take that away from someone. That's never the goal. Um, a lot of times when it comes down to men, we're not taught to deal with those things, right? We're, like it took me a long time to realize that I was messed up,
Mm-hmm.
but it took me almost taking my life to realize I was messed up.
Mm.
And that's what I mean. Like when I finally got to a place to where I was tired,
Mm.
but it wasn't a physical tired.
Right.
It was a mental tired. Like I was mentally spent.
Mm-hmm.
I was spiritually drained.
Mm-hmm.
I was my whole entire, and this is again me speaking from my own individual experience, and I know there may be other people out there maybe have gone through something similar, and everything, but I didn't want to fight anymore, Jennifer.
Yeah.
I was, it was like I always felt as if I was fighting a battle that I could never win, but I just knew that I had to fight.
Mm-hmm.
And it just got to a point to where I didn't even realize what I was fighting anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Am I fighting to survive? Am I fighting to live? I mean, what am I fighting for? Because everybody I know is gone now. Everybody I love is gone.
Mm-hmm.
I'm homeless. I have nothing. But this had been years, compound upon years of just wandering around, being a lone wolf, right? Not really having anybody or guidance or anything like that. And I had just got to a place to where I was like, you know what? If this is the way that it needs to be, I don't want to do it anymore,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then it really did. It took me one planning out my suicide, and two sitting out there 2 seconds away of pulling the trigger to realize that I wasn't afraid anymore.
Mm.
And what I mean by that, because a lot in some cases, when you talk to people about the thoughts of suicide and things like that, the secondary response is, I want to do it, but I'm afraid. I'm afraid of of where I may go, right? It could be some sort of religious belief. It could be some sort of um, um, disappointment, right? You know what I'm saying? I don't want to disappoint my friends because everybody depends on me. But I
Mm-hmm.
know what I'm supposed to do, type thing, right?
Of course.
So I want to get your thoughts about that.
Well, let me just say I'm glad you're still here.
Thank you.
And okay, so my oldest son attempted suicide when he was 13, and I interrupted the attempt.
Ooh,
Look, I absolutely understand people being either in so much pain that they just want
mhm,
that to be over.
yeah,
And I understand the piece of the tiredness, right? I see that in my husband for sure, the tiredness,
right.
right? The just like just don't even know what to do anymore. And I think the hardest part about that for me was like I was always trying to make it better. I was always trying to take away anything I could that I felt was stressful for him, and I was always trying to compensate in some way, and like I could never love him enough,
Mm, okay.
you know? But like I made that sort of my mission, right? So then again, the way that plays out, if somebody isn't verbalizing what works for them or what doesn't work for them or whatever, then there's a lot lost in translation, right?
Mm,
So at times I might have not been doing the things that would have been the most helpful, but because I could never get him to talk about it, I don't know what that was. So I was like, well, what would I want someone to do for me? Right. And again, so if the love languages are not the same, or you don't
ah,
really
there you go.
know a lot of, because you're not being told and you're just kind of assuming from what you see, things get lost in translation. And look, like, it's one of those things. Well, like what you said earlier. So in the trauma world, right, we don't talk about comparing trauma, because you can drown in 2 feet of water or 20 and you're still dead, right?
Right.
I
Right.
mean, the fact of the matter, it's different for everyone. But certainly, like, as a safe family host, I've seen things happen to kids that I can't even fathom, nor do I want to even think about, because it's just so painful to
Right.
think about. And I know, like, there's a lot of experiences my husband had that had to be so, so painful that that's brought him to where he is. And I
Mhm.
think the thing was, I was like, you're not receiving anything that I'm giving out, and we're misunderstanding each other and whatever. And at the end of the day, it just, for whatever reason, he just couldn't do it anymore. So, like, I'm not villainizing him in any way, because I understand it's his limitation in a lot of ways. And, again, is it painful? It's super painful. But he's got his own process. And I understand now that if he doesn't want to work on the things that have been going on, then he just doesn't want to.
Right. Can I add to that a little bit?
Of course.
Just to bring it different under, because I see that, and like I said, I work with men across the board, and I heard these sort of stories. They're very common, right? And what happens is you said something about the love languages. The love languages aren't there. Of course, you're going to miss the communication, you know. And Lincoln just made a comment up here, and I want to, and that's exactly what I was going to touch on right there. In a lot of cases, men do communicate, right? We do communicate what's going on with us. We don't have the necessary words to go and make it plain and simple for you to understand, because no one ever taught us the language.
Sure.
Was that it was okay to say, hey, I'm not okay right now, right?
Yeah.
So when it comes down to men, the trauma, the grief that we go through, it's like a foreign love language, right? It's like I can sit around with another man and we will talk, and what you will hear will be a totally different conversation from what we're actually saying.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
It's only because I'm listening to what he's saying, right? So if I walk up to him and go, hey, man, how you doing? Oh, man, I'm all right. First off, I'm listening to your tone.
Sure.
That's important. Listen to the tone. But I'm also watching to see where your eyes wander off to. If you're staring at me, I know that you're going through something right now. If you look down, I know that you've gotten to a point to where you're about ready to give up. So now my job is to go in and figure out what we need to do, right? But I want you to feel safe and comfortable with me. So therefore, the language is going to sound totally different.
Sure.
Man, you know what, man? You want to go down here to the bar, man? And you know what I'm saying? I can buy you a beer, and you know what I'm saying? Maybe we can get something to eat. I'm opening up the doors for one. I'm taking away everything that you need to feel as if you need to protect me.
Right.
From anything. And then while we're walking there, or while we're driving there, or something like that, I'm going to be having a conversation with you. See, it's understanding the language that men speak. Is and that's part of the thing that I teach as well. Understanding the language. Anger is one of those things. You mentioned something earlier about your husband where he worked all the time, right?
Of course.
That's another language that we speak, right?
Yep.
That a lot of people don't know.
Right.
It's not that you opened up the box and he didn't know what to do with it. See, a lot of times, here's what a misconception is. A lot of times we are trying to figure out how to deal with it. But the problem is that when it comes down to our families and the people that we care about, we don't want to be a burden to you. We don't want to lose value out of your eyes, right? So when that door opened up, now he's vulnerable. Now he has kids, he has you, he has other people watching him. It needed to come out. And
Mhm.
trust me, some years down the line, he's going to be perfectly, he's going to be good. He's just tired right now because he
Mhm.
has to fight through all of these things because no one has ever given him the right tools that he can understand in order to be able to really unpack what's going on. That's why
Mhm.
I'm a firm believer, men should be around other men when you're going through those things.
I agree
Right?
100%. I agree.
But that's what it is. And no, look, I'm not throwing shade on no one. You know what I'm saying? Because it is something that needs to be worked on, right? But you just have to understand the language. You got to know when to back off, right? You got to know when to step. And see, this is just men. We're fickle when it comes down to this, right? You know what I'm saying? We can feel very deep emotions. The problem is that when it comes down to very deep emotions, there comes labels that need to be put on those emotions. So it's not like, you know what I'm saying? It's not like I can come in and you say, hey, what's going on with you right now? I have the emotional intelligence to be able to go, right now I am filled with sorrow.
Mhm.
I am filled with I'm filled with depression. And this is the reason why. Like I have no shame in telling people the way that I feel. Doesn't make me weak. It just makes me understand
It-
my healing process.
Absolutely.
So when you've been absent, when you've had that absence for so long, well, now we have to go back in and learn how to speak,
Right.
right?
Right.
And I just want to put that out there and see what your thoughts is on
Yeah, and listen, for myself, right? I feel like that should be supported in any way it can come about.
that.
Like I actively found him a therapist that was a man because I was like, you've had enough of women in your life. Like it'd be great for you to speak to a man,
Right.
one on one and do whatever you need to do. But then it was like a thing of like he wanted me to come to the appointments all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Mm-hmm.
think there was like a lack of safety for him even in that context, right?
Right.
And so it was a very difficult thing to navigate. It's because I'm always trying to see what will work for him or help him through whatever, but it's really difficult when you don't know where someone's at. I watch behavior, I watch language, I watch all of it, but I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
He'll people please to a point where it's like, well, I'm doing this because, right? But
Mhm.
so then he's not invested in it either. So then you're like, well, where do I go with that? Right? So I can leave you be, I can whatever, but like so for instance, one of my experiences of him would be he would come in and something you could clearly tell he was angry, jaw clenched, fist clenched. He was never violent or any of that. That's just not who he is. He's not that person. But
Right.
like something would make him angry and he'd clench his fist and he'd clench his jaw and his face would be red and I was like, "Hey, looks like something's happening and you look angry." I'm not angry.
Mhm.
And I'm like, okay.
Mhm.
So then you kind of let that down and you're like, okay, you seem angry, but if you don't want to talk about it, okay, and then it would never be brought up again. Right. And it's just like, it's a difficult dynamic to navigate when you're in that situation.
Yes. Yes. If you know what you if you don't know what you're looking for, right?
Mhm.
I'm gonna put this quote up here, and this is something. There's been videos done behind this, and I'll give you some context behind this. Biggest lie I ever told was I'm all right,
Mhm.
right?
Right. For sure.
Um, as a man, that is the biggest lie that we tell people.
Mhm.
Why? Because for one, I don't want to lose my place in your life. So it's easier for me to tell you that I'm all right and get you to believe that than to worry you with the burden of what life has just done to me.
Mhm.
Here's a prime example, right? Men go out into the world on a day-to-day basis. We work jobs that we don't like.
Mhm.
We're around people that we really don't care for, right? But we're still around them because it's necessary. We're taught our whole entire lives that, you know what I'm saying, no one cares about what you're going through. No one cares. So it's better that you just man up and keep your mouth shut and just deal with life throws at you. Yeah, and then we go out here. We got to deal with people on a daily basis that may not be the kindest to us, but we suck that up, right? Because we want to come home. We want to come home. So we deal with that. We come home and you know what I'm saying, and the first thing, if we got kids or something like that and they're running rampant, and so the first thing that we do, because the first thing that our significant others do, they're out of control. So now we have to deal with them too, right? Because for one, I need to take care of you. I know that you just had, so my day doesn't really matter at that moment. What I've gone through and experienced on a day-to-day basis does not matter at that moment. I got to make sure that I keep my value in your eyes, because I don't want you to see me as anything less than the man that the man that provides for you, right? Because if I lose that, say for instance, if I lose that, right? Well, here's where men find themselves in trouble. If I lose value in your eyes, I now have no purpose. If I have no purpose, then why am I here? You get where I'm going?
I totally understand. I totally
So
get you.
once we get to that point, well, if I don't have any of these things, and I can't do the simplest things, because that's what we have, that's how we look at it, then I might as well go ahead and eliminate myself out of this world.
No, agreed.
Waste of time, right? I'm a waste of, you're better off without me.
Right.
We tell ourselves these things.
Right. And I think where I'm going to go with that is that I get that, right? I get that. And I would never argue that point or argue that's not true for people. The thing that I'm struggling with a little bit in my case, I can't speak for everybody, is I feel like I've always done my best to provide the space for him to be who he is, whoever that is, and that he's loved unconditionally. Right. And whether he can receive that or not is a different story altogether.
That's the key.
Right. You know, but like, it's like my experience and my experience of my kids saying the same thing is we've done our best to provide that space for him, that he is loved unconditionally. There's nothing he has to do to be better, but he can't take that in.
Right.
So then you kind of go, what now? Right. Like,
and I want to elaborate on that just a little bit, right? Because you know, when men do get in those, and I understand, like you provided the space, it's still unfamiliar territory. It's unfamiliar territory. Reason being, see, it has nothing to do with you, right? But it's something that he learned from one of his peers, right? He probably had hurt himself, or someone hurt him when he was a child. And he went to go tell one of his peers, and they pretty much told him, hey man, don't nobody care about what you're going through. You're gonna have to man up. Right. You know, or he probably told like his mom, his sister, a female in his life, because they said, you need to talk. I need you to tell me what's going on. And he was set up. He was set up. He went to go say, no, but you know what? I know that's what you're saying, but I'm going through something right now, and I'm going to need you to take care of what I'm going through. And we're just going to take what you just did right there, and we're going to have to push that off. You're going to have to suck that up because I need you to take care of me.
Right, exactly.
Right. And so he learned, or we as men, we learn at a very early age that we have to be very, very cautious about how we step and how we talk, right? Because the last thing although you may say that, you know what I'm saying, and you may, and it's the best intentions in the world, you may have said, you know what, I need you to open up. I'm going to create this space for you. He's going, somebody did that to me one time before. It didn't work out too well for me. So why would although, you know what I'm saying, I love you, right? I give you the world. But now you're asking me to give you something that I've had to protect my whole entire life.
Yes.
Right?
We know it's a protective mechanism, absolutely. But it becomes that barrier, right?
It is a barrier.
Yes, it's a barrier.
Totally agree. Totally. See, that's what I mean. Like there's when we begin to unpack this thing, right?
Yeah.
We realize that, you know what I'm saying, like there's a lot of different factors to add in as we begin to go, and you know how to pivot as we maneuver around each other, right? Because for one, I'm watching you just like you're watching me, right? But I'm also seeing, you know what I'm saying, and making sure that the kids are taken care of, because I want to make sure that they know that I'm still a man of the house. right? You know what I'm saying? I'm still going to protect you. So what is the price of that? Well, in order for me to be over here and feel as if um, I'm doing those things, I'm gonna have to block this part out because that has no place over here with this right here. They're not, see, we as men, this is a lie that we tell ourselves.
Right.
And it's very common across the board. Not all men are the same, but when I say this, you know what I'm saying, those men out there are going to be, ooh. A lot of times what we will do is that we will tell ourselves that it's better. It's just better this way.
Yeah.
Right. Because for one, I would rather suffer in silence than to have you fall apart in my arms.
Mm-hmm.
You did so, and that goes across the board, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the roles that we're supposed to play in this world. And so when it comes down to the different things, it's going to take a little bit, and you know, and having time to go off and do those things that you need to do is perfectly fine, you know. And it sucks because for one, hurt people, right?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
When you're hurt, you bleed all over everybody that you care about, but we do it as a safety mechanism. Like,
Right.
I don't know what to do, so I'm gonna have to get away from this situation because I don't want to hurt the people that I love. And in turn, guess what? We do exactly that.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, exactly. And that's the part, right? Like I understand all of this, right? And I that's why I try to give as much grace as possible. And like I leave this open for there's no hate between the two of us. There's none of that. Like we really aren't communicating per se, but like I don't harbor like all this animosity or this rage or anger or whatever because I know where it's coming from. It doesn't make it easier to deal with. I will say that.
No.
But the fact is, I like to say, I think the most gracious thing to say is he's limited, right? Because it's true. That's the truth. You know, I don't need to make it a villain and victim story or any whatever. This is what it is. It's not great. I don't love it, but I get it.
Yeah. Yeah. See that what Lincoln just said right there is sort of like what we've been talking about, right? And, you know, and he pretty much said it's devastating enough for him. I wouldn't ever want this suffering on anyone else. And again, it goes back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, right? You know, about those things. And that's honestly, it's so many men think that way. And we can't tell when people are genuinely concerned for us, right? And genuinely want to hold that space for us versus the person who's waiting to pounce on me, call me weak,
Yeah.
and all of those things, right?
I think I struggle with that a little bit, Tony, and I'll tell you why. Because I think 27 years should be enough of an investment for somebody
Understood.
to realize that I'm not out to get him. Do you know what I'm saying?
Understood. It's again, we talking about traumas, right?
Totally.
Again, when we think about that, play that in. 27 years, yes, is enough time. You would think, right?
Right.
To say, hey, I'm a safe space. But trauma, especially when you haven't dealt with it, it take you to a place where it's not so safe.
Right. Agreed.
And it has nothing to do with you.
Yeah. And again, that's one of those things that it's the stories we tell ourselves, right? And sometimes it's hard to make it mean something different than it means, right? And again, that's a process still for everybody, right?
Yeah. But that's the beautiful part about it, right? You know, because for one, that's the reason why we do the work, because we do come from a place of understanding and trying to be supportive and hold that space for individuals. And sometimes it's a little bit tougher of a walk from you know what I'm saying, through each individual, right? You know what I'm saying? We just have to figure out the walk that they're on so we can know how to show up and help them navigate through the mess that's about to come in front of them, right?
Right.
You know, so you know, and I agree with you on everything that you said. I really do. I agree with you on everything that you said. It's just having those different perspectives.
Yeah.
And knowing how to walk and pivot, you know, and knowing when to stop, knowing when to speak, knowing when to not speak. All of it's a fickle thing. It's such a huge fickle thing when it comes down to dealing with these underlying things. And I know this because, like I said, only through my own personal experience, it took me almost taking my life after
Sure.
I lost everybody and everything.
Yeah.
And there was people around me that I knew that cared about me, but then there was a disconnect, right? There
Of
was a
course.
there was a disconnect. I was like, well, it's probably better if I do this, right? That I'm not around. That way no one has to see me go through this or have pity on me, because I definitely don't want that. I don't want to give people the image that, what I'm saying, that I'm just a waste of time.
Yeah.
These are the things that, look, we are our own worst enemies.
Right. For
We are
sure.
our own worst enemies. I would convince myself that I'm a waste of time, and you ain't got to say a word,
Right. Exactly. And even if
right?
I did say a word, it wouldn't make a difference.
It wouldn't make that's the point. That's the point I was trying to make
Right.
right there.
Right.
Even if you did say a word, it wouldn't make a difference. So now we look at, play into, the situation and everything. You just laid it all out
Yeah.
right there. And so that's when, it's not a bad thing, right? It's not, and I know it can seem that way, but this is that individual walk that we all talk about,
100%.
you
And
know?
the thing is, right, you see grief come up because it makes me sad,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah,
you don't want somebody you love going through that alone.
there you go. There you go. And sometimes we just need people like yourself and so many people out there that are doing wonderful work to go and not to give a hand out, but to give a hand up,
100%.
right? You know what I'm saying?
100%.
Because I know without the people that came into my life periodically throughout my journey to lift me up, right? And give me the space um, to breathe,
Yeah.
to get up on my own, like, because we can't get up for most people, we can't get up for the people, you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying, but we can. Yeah, I'm here with you. When you're ready to get up, then we'll begin to move again,
Yeah.
because they're going to get tired. But the thing is that in those moments where they get tired, I want to make sure that they know that, hey, I'm still here,
Right.
right? I'm still here. That's it, no more.
Right.
um Yep, build each other, not carry each other. That's he also says, Jennifer, thank you so much. You really did a lot for him this afternoon. You're amazing, and God bless you. So
Thank you.
I'm gonna put that up there so you can see the
That's
comment.
so kind. Thank you so much.
So that's what he said. And thank you, Lincoln, for putting that up there, man. That means a lot. So again, when you don't think that people are out there listening to what we're saying, these are the impacts that we have with those individuals, and that's the reason why we have these stories, right?
Yeah.
But let's talk about. You got a copy of your book this time?
Yeah.
Okay, let's see the copy of your book. Tell people where to find your book.
So it's necessary grief, and it's all about the journey through kind of trauma healing with compassionate inquiry and internal family systems. And it's
Mhm.
on Amazon and Kindle, and it will soon be on Audible. And yeah, I just hope to be able to kind of provide a little bit of resources around the modalities that I use to kind of navigate through a lot of the difficult situations.
Mhm.
And it's life changing work for people. And so I hope people can, see some of the process and maybe make it work for themselves in their own life. And that was why I became a trauma informed coach, because I've been a mental health advocate for over 15 years, but this is a little bit different lane,
Yeah,
but I feel like it's a real effective one.
I believe it is. I believe it is. And just talking with you, that just laid out everything right there. I was just like, you got your thing on, and you do that thing, Um, and so I guess my next question would be, when your kids look at you, um, do they let you know how proud they are of you?
They do
Uh,
all the time. And I'm so grateful for my kids. I mean, look, my kids are amazing. They really, really are. And I have to say, Tony, that like this trauma work that I did for myself
mhm,
made the largest difference in my relationship with my kids. We always had a good relationship, but we have a relationship on a different level now because
Right.
I think they really see me taking personal responsibility for everything. And I talk to them. I've apologized for things that have happened in the past, going, that was not my best self that I showed up as, and I'm genuinely sorry. They know it's true. I make amends, and it's the rupture repair situation. And we kind of do it in real time now. We'll have ruptures. I mean, three of my kids still live at home with me, and there's times that stuff happens, right? People get
Mhm.
triggered. I get triggered. They get triggered. But we talk about it in real time in the moment. And so then there's nothing harboring, there's nothing that gets carried, and everybody knows where everybody's at.
Right.
So it's like a really beautiful thing.
And that's the part about it, right? Because you've done a lot of work,
Yeah.
and you was able to go back, and your kids see this, and you're leading by example
Yeah.
and everything. So and I know watching what you've gone through with the divorce, you're dealing with the grief and all of these different facets, these different layers that you've had to bring out to the forefront.
Yeah.
And so, you know what? I need to go and address all of these things has made you the person that you are today. And I would have to say, truly, truly inspiring, truly,
Thank you.
right? And it's not enough words to be said for individuals that actually can find it in themselves to want to go out and serve other people what you've found and what you've learned, because a lot of people get stuck and
Yeah.
don't move with it, and not
Right.
even moving past it, but move along with it and being able to grow and
Right.
develop,
Right.
right?
Right. Well,
And
and just look at all the work you've done, and you putting out this podcast helps so many people because everything is so relatable, right? And when we realize we're here and here and not here and here,
right.
it's a big difference.
Oh, yeah. But that's the purpose of it, right?
Right?
Because no, look, we all need to be on an even playing field in order
Yes.
to go out and be on the field,
Yes.
you know. And that's why I love doing this, right? The conversations that we have, that people understand that, hey, we're normal people that have found a purpose in serving other people. And that's what it's about.
Yeah.
Your work is phenomenal. And it's a piece of the puzzle that needs to be added on the field,
Yeah.
right? Because for one, I mean, I wouldn't know where to start when it comes down to dealing with, helping others dealing with trauma. I deal with grief, right? Trauma and stuff comes a little bit later, and I often go, maybe this is a little bit beyond me. Let me call Jennifer. But like, Jennifer, I got somebody for you. Well, this is what we've done,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Stay in my own lane, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's the purpose. I stay in my own lane, but I love having the fact of that I can call someone and say, hey, this may be a little bit beyond me. Um, do you think you can help this individual?
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's the purpose of having connections and networking and having conversations, because people know what they get themselves into.
Yeah, exactly. And the collaboration, right? Like people collaborating in this way to help other people.
Right.
Like you might have pieces that I don't, and I might have pieces that you don't, but when we work together to serve somebody, the all bases covered, right?
There
It's good.
you go. There you go. And that's the purpose of it, man. And it becomes a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful thing. So what else you got going on in your life? What else you got coming up?
Oh, let's see. Well, I actually just took a trip recently. I was in France for 6 weeks, which
Okay.
was super fun. And now I am currently painting, which is the first time I've ever endeavored that. I've always done some art, but I'm painting and I'm working with some clients and just trying to take time for myself and enjoy my kids and things like that. So we're slowing down a little bit, but it's good.
Nice, nice, very, very nice. Now, how can people find you?
So, yeah, the best way really is to get on my website, which is www.courageousawareness.co. And my contact information is on there. And my website has some resources. And I welcome anybody emailing me anytime with questions, or I'm happy to provide resources, free of charge. If you just need something specific you want to work on, I'm happy to throw resources your way. Yeah, but that's the way to find me.
Awesome, awesome. Now, before I let you go, I always ask everybody this: if you could leave the audience with something right now, what would you leave them with?
Invest in yourself. right? And invest in the stories that you've told yourself all this time and really turn them over and take a look at them and see what serves you and what doesn't. Because the work you do will not only benefit you, it'll benefit everyone else.
I love that. Love that. I want to say thank everyone for tuning in today. Megan, everybody on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube. Everybody, thank you guys for tuning in. Jennifer, thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, it's such an amazing conversation. I would love to do this again. Next time you pick a topic and we're going to dive into it.
Sounds good.
So yeah, thank you for making this possible. For everyone else, if this is your first time tuning in and you made it all the way through to the end, do me a favor, head over to that YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button. It's right there on the bottom right there. If you know a man who is struggling right now and is looking for support, I do have my website down there, but also go visit Jennifer's website and get the help that you need and deserve. And know that there are people out here that care about you, that want to see you become the best version of yourself. And don't be afraid to let us walk with you. Be receiving and be open and honest with yourself too, because not everything comes with a smile on the face. Sometimes it comes with tears too.
Yeah.
That being said, this is going to conclude this episode of Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. Thank you guys always for tuning in and for the support. And as always, if you know anyone who could benefit from these conversations that we have, please share this with them. And guys, warm welcome to my guests, and go check her out. Jennifer, we're going to talk soon.
Sounds good.
We'll see you in the next episode. Keep smiling, keep building memories for those that you love, and don't forget to tell them that you love them, because you never know what life may throw at you. See you guys in the next one.